I'm doing your great work and I cannot come down. Why should the work stop so I can come down to you? That is a great work from 2,000 years ago in Jerusalem, as discussed in the Bible and the book of Nehemiah. Let's discuss how this continues to affect the region and the U.S. and national security today here on the Great Work Podcast. All right, welcome back. Great Work Podcast episode. I don't know what episode this is, but it is Wednesday, August 7th. We're kind of doing a daily news update, and in a lot of ways, there's not a lot of news going on today. I mean, we have both Trump and Vance and Kamala Walz in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, so nearby me somewhat, and that's kind of interesting. It's weird that they're doing rallies in the same place. I think at the Kamala Walz rally, they have Bon Iver there, which is like an indie artist. The crowd there was huge. It was massive. I think it's funny that Democrats are now running saying like, oh my God, see, like there's so much excitement. Trump never had a big name like that. I mean, his biggest name at his rallies were like the My Pillow guy. Trump lost in 2020 and he had rallies that size multiple every single day across swing states. So it is funny to me now that Democrats loved, Trump always brings up the crowd size. And now they're falling into the same trap. It's very interesting to see them fall into the same trap. But it's kind of a slow news day. We might see an Iranian response, a response from the Islamic Republic to Israel tomorrow. I saw a NOTAM that they closed their airspace from 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. or something, Iranian Standard Time, or they gave that notification to Egypt not to use Iranian airspace during that time. So we might see an Iranian response. I don't know. If that happens, I haven't been doing these daily updates on Friday, but I will do it on Friday if we see a response. And I guess we don't know how big that response would be. There have been mixed reporting, I guess, now that there might be a strike back or that they've always been mulling over one. The Biden administration is putting out that they're closer to a ceasefire deal than they ever have been right now, which is kind of weird. There's a lot. There also was a Washington Post reporting citing that U.S. show of strength, putting our ships all over the region, that has been deterring Iran, which, deterrence works, people. Appeasement doesn't. Deterrence works. I think the main thing I want to talk about today, I think it'll be a short episode, but I want to talk kind of about my friend Z.E. Silver posted a video yesterday that I almost responded to and then didn't because I have too many thoughts on it. Basically, somebody asked him why he, as a Jew, would not want the Iran deal to be in place, because wouldn't he want Iran to not be able to get a nuclear weapon? And so wouldn't he support the Iran deal? And he kind of went through in a good way talking about how, well, just because the Iran deal said that it was not going to allow Iran to get, to pursue a nuclear weapon, did not mean it actually followed through on that. He talked about how Obama, John Kerry, and Ben Rhodes kind of went about that, believing that, the mullahs were acting in good faith, and they clearly weren't, which, Israel always said, which people on the American right always said. But Obama, Ben Rhodes, John Kerry just really wanted to say that they got that deal done. And so that's why they pursued it. And then Trump pulled out. But I want to take this a couple places. First of all, I could talk all day long about the Iran deal. I did an entire hour-long podcast talking about all the reasons that the Iran deal is bad. So if you go back and listen, you can listen to that and I lay out pretty much from memory, actually, because I hate that deal so much. I don't need to go into it all again, why that deal sucked. And, essentially, I would add one point to what Z.E. said in his video, which is that I think Obama, John Kerry, Ben Rhodes, I think they knew at the time that the Iranians, that the regime was not moderate. But I think they thought over time they would moderate if they open up to, the rest of the world. I think their thought process was, well, if we open them up to trade with, the United States and Europe, they won't supply oil to our main adversaries, Russia and Iran, or Russia and China, and they'll be more like a neutral actor. Plus, if we wanted to back out of the Middle East, they kind of have an existing structure with their proxy network that they could kind of be the Middle Eastern policemen, which would fit in with like historical standards because, Iran typically has been like a regionally dominant power in that region, as has Turkey, which is, I think, why you see the Democrats typically kind of favor foreign policy that would more heavily favor, Iran and Turkey having these like a better sense of the region or more legitimacy in the region. However, that didn't work out, clearly. Iran did not moderate when we gave them a bunch of sanctions waivers, and in fact, they went against the deal that they signed. Israel had intelligence, which the U.S. confirmed, that they were using underground sites to enrich uranium, which they did not notify the IAEA of, which was in direct violation of the agreement. Beyond that, the agreement was written in a sense that the IAEA didn't even have the ability to look over all of the Iranian military sites, so any of the IRGC sites. So like, you're telling me that they weren't going to be doing any military or nuclear enrichment, any research, anything like that at any IRGC site? That's preposterous. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in the world, but that was a part of the deal. So it was a bad deal. And, I kind of hate where we're at right now with the political cycle and with I think that point that Z.E. Silver makes about the Iran deal is a good way to present kind of this problem that I see. I think it exists more on the right, or it's worse for the right than it is for the left, but the left gets it too, where it's presented as the left can do no wrong, and of course they made this great deal. Why would you ever say that the deal is bad? Obama would never make a bad deal for us, and, Trump pulled out of that deal for no reason, and that's why Iran's on its way to a nuke. Well, no, not really, because when Trump pulled out, again, he didn't pull out for no reason. He took away the sanctions relief. He put in place a maximum pressure campaign on the Islamic Republic of Iran, which made it so that they could not really export oil anymore. They were broke. They were ready to collapse, that regime. And the Islamic Republic, they're the worst to their own people. I think they did 20 executions today of Iranians who just speak out against the regime. This is not a regime that we should want in power. I understand that we shouldn't be going about, regime change in the sense that, we should just be storming into people's countries and like taking people out of power, especially when like you don't know if the populace can really handle it. But like, the majority of Iranians, people say 95%, that's probably not true, but 70-80% of Iranians want a moderate regime in place. They don't want to be forced to wear a hijab. They don't want their money to be spent building up these proxies throughout the region so that the Islamic revolution can be exported throughout the region. They want things to be taken care of at home. They want to be able to travel to see their family members that had to flee into the diaspora, into Europe and America. They're an educated populace. They wouldn't have the exact same probably values as we do in America. There would be clear differences between like an Iranian regime and an American or Western European regime and electoral system and stuff, but they're not these like radicals, the majority of them. And again, like when Biden came back into office, he wanted to get back into the JCPOA. They've been trying to reestablish ties to the JCPOA or re-enter the deal. And so they gave him all these sanctions waivers again. It's $60 billion or something like that Iran has gotten in sanctions waivers. Plus they're exporting millions of barrels of oil per day. When Trump left office, it was around 200,000 or 100,000. So there's a ton there that is just like kind of frustrating. But again, like we're not even having this discussion I guess my problem is when we're on social media or anywhere, when people are having this, even in the media, we're not having the discussion based on like, was the deal good or bad? Or like, why would somebody oppose the deal? It's if you oppose the deal, you want Iran to get a nuke, and Obama would never make a bad deal. And if you oppose the deal, you're the problem. And that's not true. Another thing I saw this with, again, I can just think of these things from a conservative perspective because that's what I am. But like the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. My parents are both self-employed. I was too young to like have my own insurance or anything back when that was passed, but my family's insurance premiums like went up 4 times. Like they like quadrupled under the Affordable Care Act. They made our healthcare significantly less affordable. My personal families. My family's not the only family that happened to. A lot of people's healthcare got less affordable under the Affordable Care Act. They had to switch doctors. A lot of like bad came of that. But the conversation being had in the media is like, well, if you oppose the Affordable Care Act, you want grandma kicked off a cliff and to die. Because you want everybody to have unaffordable healthcare. No. We're mad that our healthcare went up during a recession when like income went down for self-employed people for the most part. Like that, no, that's not how that works. Like, why can't we have an intelligent conversation about, like, just because it's called the Affordable Care Act, just because it's called the Iran deal and it's painted, it's marketed as it's going to prevent them from getting a nuke, does not mean that's actually what's going to happen. And Democrats, like I said, I think they get away with this way more because the media just favors them. I'm sorry, but it does. And it's like really frustrating as a Republican to go through all of this because, like, people wonder why Republicans don't watch mainstream media that they consider liberal. Well, it's because this is how they paint us. We all want grandma to die because we oppose something that definitively made a policy that made our lives worse. And if we bring that up, we're just evil. Like, that's how Republicans are talked about a lot. It's like that we're evil. And we're not evil. We just have different opinions than people. And, an eagle has a right and a left wing. You need both to fly. But that's not how we're spoken about a lot of the time in like mainstream media. So I'm just thinking about this because I don't know if I've mentioned this on the podcast yet, but like last week, the congressman from Maryland's 5th congressional district was talking about what's going on in Venezuela. And he called Maduro a far-right leader. Maduro was a Marxist. In no way, shape, or form is a self-described Marxist a right-wing person. But like, again, we on the right, our leaders, everything, like, we're not able to define ourselves as an inside group. The outside, the left, the media, they define us for ourselves. With labels that we wouldn't use ourselves. Nobody on the right, if you put us in a room with Nicolas Maduro or whatever his name is, we wouldn't have any agreement on policy with him whatsoever. Now, I think he's become more authoritarian, which is on traditional political axes spoken about as like a right-wing attribute, but also, a lot of governments, as they start to lose the will of the people, especially if they have elections, they will get more authoritarian. That doesn't mean that they automatically become right-wing. And I actually have a problem with the traditional political axes putting authoritarianism completely on the right because it's just like it mischaracterizes things. But again, like on the right, we don't get to define ourselves. Another thing I see all the time is people talk about like Nick Fuentes, far-right influencer. If you talk to any young male right-winger, okay, if you go up to, or actually not even young male, if you go up to 9 out of 10 people on the street who would describe themselves as conservative and say, what, do you watch Nick Fuentes on a daily basis, weekly basis? Do you follow what he has to say and agree with him? Do you get your news and opinions from him? 9 out of 10 are going to say no. But the left, when they talk about us, it's like, well, Nick Fuentes, he speaks for the right. How does he speak for the right when 9 out of 10 of us don't even watch him, don't even care, don't agree with anything he has to say? He still has millions of followers because he's built that up or something, or hundreds of thousands, I don't know. But like I've never been to a right-wing event where people are like, "Oh, well, Nick Fuentes, he makes some good points," or like, "I was watching him." Most of the people on the right, if you ask them who do they normally consume for media, they watch Ben Shapiro or Tucker Carlson or Sean Hannity. And I'm sorry, but you're being intellectually honest if you are going to put Fuentes in the same bucket as the other three. Tucker, since he went independent, he's gotten a little weird. He's gotten a little bit more like off the mainstream, off the beaten path, a little bit more leaning on conspiracy, but he's nowhere near Nick Fuentes. Right wingers, again, like, why don't we get to define who our people are? Why don't we get to define our messaging? Somebody was just messaging me, Tony, who I think you listen to this, saying like she's annoyed because she listened to the Walls speech in Eau Claire and all he did was talk about Project 2025. Every left-wing thing you hear is, well, but they're going to do Project 2025. Trump and Vance repeatedly disavow and say, well, we're not going to do that. If you listen to a Trump and Vance rally, they never talk about Project 2025. That's not in their main policy proposal. Their thing is Agenda 47. But the left is, well, but they're all going to do Project 2025. We're not even having the same, like, conversations. It's so frustrating. And again, we don't get to define ourselves. I'm sure you can make this argument about the left too. I'm sure that you could. I think it exists more on the right. But then again, when you get to the point where you have people on the right feeling like disillusioned and stuff, well, this is why, because we don't even get to define our movement ourselves. When it's defined for us, we're called evil. So we just opt out of the system where we're called evil. And then we get to the situation we're in now where both sides are fighting over what the other side is saying, and maybe both are complete mischaracterizations. Again, it's a mischaracterization about the right to say that we're a bunch of Christian nationalists that are pursuing Project 2025. There's nothing in Agenda 47 that says that like all people will be converted to Christianity on a mass basis, mass level. There's nobody within a position of power in the Republican Party, not Speaker Mike Johnson, not Donald Trump, not J.D. Vance, not any legitimate person of power, influential leader, Governor Glenn Youngkin, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, none of them. They'll talk openly about their faith because it's important to them, but in none of their speeches do they go and say, well, we're going to mass convert people to Christianity, which is what Christian nationalism implies, or that we're going to give better rights to Christians. That they've never said anything like that. They've said we shouldn't shy away from our Christian ideals and principles. That's not the same as like preferential treatment to Christians or to white people or to anything like that. But we're having completely different conversations. It's so annoying and frustrating. The left could make the argument that the right is doing this to them too, with Tim Walz and with Kamala. They're trying to paint them as these moderates. And Vance and Trump are saying, no, you're not, because you haven't governed as moderates at all. In no way, shape, or form has Tim Walz governed as a moderate governor. He had a moderate record in Congress, sure. He still voted with Democrats like 98% of the time, but he had an A rating from the NRA and stuff like that. So like, yeah, he was more moderate back then, but he no longer has an A rating from the NRA. He has signaled that he supports like pretty he's endorsed by David Hogg. This is not like a gun-friendly, moderate Democrat anymore. He's not anymore. Even Biden ran as like moderate, I'm going to unite everyone. He won by like 30,000 votes across 4 states. He barely won that election. He did not win the House, and Democrats underperformed in the House what they thought they would. And they won the Senate, but that wasn't really their doing. It was more Trump's screwing over Georgia. And Biden came in as if he had a mandate. He was trying to pass a $6 billion spending bill. Republicans ended up getting it down to $2 billion because they just wouldn't have passed a $6 billion spending deal. But like he came in like he's this has this overwhelming mandate and only appealed to progressives. when that's not how he was elected. Now it doesn't matter because he's not running again. But Kamala never had to like appeal to moderates in any of her. She had the most liberal record. Walz, when he took over, he won by a larger margin than Biden did, but he did not govern as a moderate like he ran on at all. And so when Trump and Vance asked them, like, why have all of your major policy positions shifted? Kamala, why do you no longer want to ban red meat? Why do you no longer want to ban fracking? Why do you no longer support single-payer healthcare? Why do you no longer, like, all of these things that she's walked back and won't answer questions about? Again, the Kamala Walz thing is that they're moderate and that they never, like it's wrong to characterize them as these extreme progressives. Fine, but you need to account for why you changed your mind. So it's a little different, because Trump has never endorsed Project 2025. He's never even been an extremist on abortion or anything like that. So I don't know. This is just, to me, like one of the frustrating things. I don't know how else to put it other than like it's just very frustrating as a conservative or a Republican that we don't get to define our group for ourselves. We get defined by the outside. And I guess at the end of the day, does it even matter? I filmed this before and it went out, so I might be repeating myself, but because I can't remember what I said, but like at the end of the day, Tim Walz, it doesn't matter that he's governed as a progressive as the governor because he comes off as pretty moderate. There's moderate rhetorically speaking, and then there's moderate policy-wise. Kamala, I don't know what she comes off as rhetorically speaking, like in terms of her rhetoric, but in terms of her policies, to call her a moderate is false. Walz, if you look at the totality of his votes he's ever taken in his career, I think you can call him a moderate. Again, I think it's better to weight his more recent positions and like more recent things that he's passed as governor when he was an executive. But he talks like he's moderate, right? Like rhetorically speaking, he is kind of folksy, down to earth Midwestern. It didn't really help him in rural areas of Minnesota in the 2022 election, but it might help him outside of, if people even care, because I kind of am of the position that like people don't really care about the vice presidential pick at the end of the day. And I think people are kind of bored of Trump and Kamala, so they'd rather talk about JD Vance and Tim Walz right now. That's just my vibe, like the thing that I'm picking up. But then too, when you look at Trump, his positions for the most part, with a couple notable exceptions, and the exceptions would be like, again, the Supreme Court, which to characterize the Supreme Court as far right when they just adhere to originalist jurisprudence is extremely disingenuous. But again, we don't get to define that ourselves as conservative. The media defines us for it. I can go into that more in depth if people are interested to hear, but like as conservatives, as like Trump passed things that no other Republican would touch with a 10-foot pole. He passed criminal justice reform. No Republican would do that. Like things like that. Tariffs on China. I mean, there were certain things that are more centrist. I guess I don't know that I would say the tariffs are centrist, but I think you guys get what I'm saying. There are certain aspects, like Trump policy-wise is a moderate populist, but being that he talks like he's kind of an extremist, that's the way he's spoken about. JD Vance, if anything, he's doubling down on the Trump base of like these like working class, like hillbilly, elegant voters. Again, that's not a traditional like far right conservative. They can pick out sound bites where he sounds like calling people cat ladies. I don't know why that fits on the far right of the political axes, but I guess it's because the Democrats and the media have defined that as such, that now that these are like two extremist far right candidates versus moderates who have extremely progressive records. And I guess my point with that is like, A, to point out that it's happening, but B, we just talk about moderate to the average American voter, I think means more like rhetorically, like how they perceive people versus like their actual policy positions. So Republicans might be kind of in a pickle if we're barking up the tree of like, these are extremist progressive liberals, because at the end of the day, again, I don't think that they're going to perceive Kamala at all as like moderate, but Walz they will consider moderate, even though it's not really his record, if you weight it in the way that I think that you should. So I don't know. These are kind of my thoughts today. I'm sorry if it's a little rambly or a little unpolished. If you have any thoughts about this, DM me, comment on my TikToks about this kind of stuff, because I'm very curious if other people see this phenomenon or if I'm just like annoying to be thinking this. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. So comment below, message me, DM me. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And with that, we will talk tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day. An Excelsior Studios original production.
A Hamilton County woman is facing serious charges accused of scamming several people out of rental homes.
April 26, 2023 was a normal day for most in the suburbs of Indianapolis, but it was shaping up to be a very bad day for 25-year-old Megan Stoner, who was notified of a warrant out for her arrest.
9 charges for corrupt business influence fraud, where the loss is between $750,000 and $50,000, and theft.
And unfortunately for Megan, she would not be navigating her newfound legal troubles in private, because a community of hundreds who had been quietly watching her for years was assembling on the internet to discuss their experiences with her, which ranged from bizarre to dangerous to outright criminal, arguably worse than what Megan had been charged with.
Basically what she did was emotionally manipulated and I'll say abused even me for about nearly these 10 years.
And like, she will suck you dry. Any inch you give her, she just takes them out. Like
Google number after Google number. You block the one, she's not done yet. She's going to get that last word.
The second you let her in, she takes over. And I mean, I would wake up to 20, 30, 40 notifications. I mean, she was scrolling back through things from my high school.
He's a dangerous human being.
And the strangest thing of all is, as her case unfolded, she continued to interact with this online community, which she called her haters, which was made up of business owners she had scammed, politicos from throughout the country that she had solicited for donations, a network of evangelical pastors located outside of the United States, a local brigade of moms who had called out her antics in Facebook groups for years, and even a sex shaman ended up coming together to solve crimes that she had not yet been caught for, and were able to catch her after she ran from the police for a month and finally put her in jail. So, how did this self-described political consultant, mental health advocate, teacher, and sexual assault survivor get into this mess in the first place? And how much of her story that she had told of herself on social media for years was actually true? That's what we'll explore here every Thursday on Don't Waste This Fucking Podcast, the story of Megan Stoner.